Today, we'll live through a day in the skin of a real medieval king. With his help, we'll find out whether living like royalty is really something to dream about, or whether those romanticized phrases lie. Along the way, we'll bust some myths about the Middle Ages, dive into hygiene, science, and of course, the Crusades. It's going to be fascinating. So, please welcome our guest, Antoine Griezmann. Okay, we admit, he's not a real historical king. But that's exactly the point. Instead of focusing on a single figure, we've created a composite character drawn from several French monarchs. Our fictional Griezmann represents the average king, the kind of ruler you'd most likely be under in 12th century France. If you can guess his real-life inspirations after watching, let us know in the comments. Our Antoine wakes up in the royal palace in Paris, in the year 1147. He's 27 years old and has already ruled for 16 years, not bad by medieval standards. Between 927 and 1485, England cycled through 32 monarchs, each ruling an average of 17 years. And out of 64 French kings in history, the average lifespan was under 40. So yes, Antoine's doing well. If he's ruled for 16 years and he's 27, it means he became king at just 11. That was common. Kings often took the crown after their fathers died in battle. In Antoine's case, his father was still alive at the time of his coronation. In France, it was customary to crown sons early so that if the king died unexpectedly, there wouldn't be a power struggle. And that's exactly what happened. Antoine's father died 10 years ago, but the already crowned son kept the kingdom stable. Another thing that helped, marriage. Like most royal marriages, Antoine's was arranged. At 17, his father married him to Eleanor of Aquitaine. Aquitaine being one of the wealthiest regions in France, often fighting for independence. Becoming both king and Duke of Aquitaine? That's hitting the political jackpot. But the benefits ended there. Antoine and Eleanor live in separate chambers. That was the norm. Royal marriages were rarely about love. They were strategic. Husbands and wives were polite at best. Separate bedrooms were standard, a tradition that oddly still survives among some wealthy couples today. Back then, it wasn't about personal space or avoiding snoring. It was because the spouses were essentially strangers. And yes, having mistresses, or lovers for queens, was widely accepted. Antoine, however, is a rare exception. He dislikes the idea of illegitimate heirs and believes in producing a legitimate heir with his lawful wife. That's partly because he's a devout Christian, as any king of the time would be. In 1147, the Christian Church is at the height of its power, and the Pope's influence extends across Europe. The king is seen as the most holy figure in the kingdom and must behave accordingly. So, when Antoine wakes up and his servants dress him in full royal regalia, his first stop is the church, usually no later than 7 a.m. Kings woke early. After all, it was the Middle Ages, not a time for sleeping in. Farmers were already feeding livestock by sunrise, and the king, as head of the nation, rose with them. With the help of a priest, Antoine recites a prayer, tailored to the day, the season, and current events. If it's harvest time, he prays for a good crop. If there's war, he prays for victory. If there's unrest in the kingdom, he prays for peace. Right now, Antoine is praying for success in the upcoming crusade. The Muslims have taken the city of Edessa. And Antoine, as a Christian king, couldn't stay idle. Last year, he took the cross, a formal pledge blessed by the church, and is now preparing for the second crusade. After the church, Antoine takes a stroll through the courtyard, where people from all walks of life await his attention. It was royal tradition to spend time listening to citizens' problems. Lords might seek help resolving a land dispute. Widows might ask for compensation for fallen husbands. Antoine is a good king and tries to help, issuing decrees to his aides. Not all kings did this. England's King Edward I only accepted written complaints, which meant only nobles could participate since most peasants were illiterate. After public duties, Antoine meets with advisors. Before lunch, he discusses finances, politics, and military matters. Right now, he's briefing his trusted consul, Olivier Giroux, who will run the kingdom while Antoine is off on crusade. The king doesn't need to micromanage. Servants and officials are plentiful. His job is to approve the plans his advisors present. What he does focus on are alliances and potential threats. That's the real meat of ruling. At lunch, he feasts like a god. But the food isn't his main concern. He listens to envoys, spies, and knights bringing news, rumors, and gossip. This is feudal Europe. Being king on paper doesn't mean much. Many lords acknowledge him only out of formality, but act like kings in their own lands. Aquitaine, for example, his own duchy, still refuses to accept royal appointees. And then there's Henry Plantagenet, ruler of Anglo-Normandy. Officially loyal, but clearly biding his time to expand his influence. While Antoine eats, his mind races. Should he marry his daughter off to the ruler of Champagne for a military alliance against England? Or offer her to an English prince for peace through diplomacy? Did he forget any minor vassals who might flip sides in a future conflict? Being king means constant scheming. In the 12th century alone, 28 monarchs were assassinated. Over 20 kings in a century died due to war or court conspiracies. Antoine doesn't want to join them. After lunch comes private talks and rest. Kings actually had plenty of free time in the afternoons. Outside of evening prayer, there weren't many obligations. They read, hunted, conspired, or simply relaxed. Antoine, preparing for crusade, spends time reading the Bible. Many kings, tired of stress and fear, turned to unique hobbies. Edward II loved construction and would sometimes pick up a shovel and dig trenches himself. Not because he was bored, but because his mind was exhausted from non-stop political survival. Let's bust a couple myths. First, medieval kings weren't filthy. That myth came later during the Renaissance, which tried to discredit everything that came before. Antoine loves to swim, often visits rivers, and of course, the royal palace has a fine bath. People cleaned their hands with wine alcohol, wiped their bodies with wet cloths, and overall stayed fairly clean for the time. The myth of no bathing comes from a misinterpreted church quote about health. But it was taken way out of context. The same goes for science. Antoine loves counting and reading ancient texts translated from Arabic and Greek. Science wasn't suppressed. Many in the church actually supported learning, including the idea of a round earth. Eyeglasses? Invented in the Middle Ages, with church support. No, medieval science wasn't as fast-moving as in Rome. But that's mostly due to the decentralized nature of feudal Europe. Now, in 1147, Antoine is heading east for the Second Crusade. This will boost his image among nobles and peasants alike. Defenders of the faith were highly respected. That said, he won't achieve much. Kings weren't great on campaign. They brought entire bedroom sets, hundreds of servants, and expected royal comfort. Not the best strategy for war. Still, Antoine survives and returns to rule France for another decade. Hopefully now you see. Being king wasn't just about luxury and power. It meant constant scheming, high stakes, and decisions that could get you killed. Would you want to be a king, knowing all this? Let us know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this journey through medieval history, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel.